This morning the gate guard rolled his eyes as the old man's truck coughed to a stop under the porch light. He mocked the worn license tag pressed for ID, like it was a test the man had already passed 100 quiet times before. Then the plastic card caught the light base seal metal stamp, a lifetime folded into laminate, and the radios went still, sirens softening mid-air. Quiet men leave echoes, too. This one began with a coin on the dashboard shining against the dawn. The morning light on Ashfield Hill came soft and gold, the kind that made old paint look forgiven. Henry Doyle was out front, tightening the small brass latch on his fence gate, when the white HOA sedan rolled to a stop. The engine clicked, cooling. A young officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, posture crisp like starch. "Morning, sir," he said. "You're Henry Doyle." Henry nodded slow. "Last I checked." The officer peeled a notice from his pad and pinned it to the wooden gate with a pushpin. The paper fluttered once in the breeze. "Notice of violation, unapproved flag display." Henry read the words without moving his lips. His hearing aid hummed faintly. The sound of a church bell drifted up the street 12 beats behind the breeze. "It's just an old flag," he said quietly. "Regulations changed last month," the officer replied. "The size exceeds code. Colors faded, too. We're required to post citation." Henry looked at the cloth rippling on the pole. The colors weren't what they used to be, more memory than pigment now, but he'd kept it clean folded right on Sundays. He nodded again, not trusting his voice. "I'll look into it." "Appreciate that, sir." The car door shut neat and final, and the sedan rolled away down the hill. The neighborhood went still except for a sparrow fighting a piece of twine. Henry's hand steadied the gate before it could swing open. His hip ached where the weather always found it. Across the street, Mrs. Landry pretended to prune her roses while watching. She whispered something toward the mailman, and Henry caught only a scrap of it. "Still thinks he's on base." He smiled thinly. People meant well, mostly. They just didn't know what silence cost. At the foot of the flagpole, sunlight caught a small coin resting in the grass. He bent carefully, fingers stiff, and picked it up. A simple brass token worn smooth, stamped with a faint emblem, a circle and wings almost gone. He rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger. It wasn't money. It was memory, plain and weighty. The flag above him snapped once in the wind. He looked up, squinting. "Guess the rules didn't cover kindness," he murmured. The paper on the gate flapped against the wood, a dry, steady rhythm that sounded like applause no one meant to give. Inside the house, the screen door creaked. A clock ticked in the quiet. He poured coffee into the same chipped mug he'd used since '79, sat near the window, and watched the notice dance. But there was steadiness in the sound of that flutter, something that refused to give all the way to silence. He took a slow sip, the cup warm against both hands. Out beyond the porch, the flag caught the light again, threadbare but upright. The hill breathed. The day went on, and Henry Doyle, veteran neighbor rule-breaker by accident, watched the wind carry dignity like it still belonged there. The next afternoon, the sun came flatter, sliding across the front porch of Henry Doyle's house on Ashfield Hill. The flag on the pole hung loose, its shadow thin on the gravel walk. The mailbox leaned again, one hinge rusted from last winter's salt. Henry crouched to tighten the screw, but the screwdriver slipped in his stiff fingers. The tool clattered onto the walk. "Need a hand, sir?" The voice was quick, respectful, but bright. A young man crossed the street in a gray t-shirt with the fire department crest faint on the sleeve. Henry straightened slowly. "Guess that depends who's offering." "Eli Turner, sir. Station 3. They said you're the one who used to fix everything around here." He picked up the screwdriver and knelt beside the post. Henry gave a half smile. These hands used to anyway. They worked quietly a moment, the small metallic rhythm of the screws filling the space between sentences. When the hinge settled straight, Henry tapped the box door. It clicked neat and true. Eli brushed dust from his knees. "Still good as new, sir," Henry chuckled softly. "Don't let the HOA hear you. They'd file a report on Joy next." The young man laughed, short and genuine. Still, something hovered in his glance, a curiosity not quite spoken. He looked toward the faded flag, then back to Henry's jacket draped on the porch rail. "People talk, you know," Eli said carefully. "They say things." Henry sipped from his coffee mug. "They always do. Some folks said maybe you weren't really in service, that the patch is just for show." Eli's words came hesitant, but the weight of rumor sat between them like a third voice. Henry didn't answer right away. He reached into his pocket, drew out the small brass coin and set it on the railing. The metal caught a thin beam of sun and flashed once before rolling to a stop. "That means something?" Eli asked. "Used to," Henry said. "Now it's just habit." Eli picked it up, thumb tracing the worn emblem. The faint circle and wings looked more suggestion than design. "Doesn't look like any unit coin I've seen." "No reason you would," Henry said, taking it back gently. "Some things weren't meant for souvenir shops." The breeze lifted the corner of yesterday's notice on the gate. For a moment, the only sound was that soft flutter, and then the faint clink of the coin dropping back into Henry's pocket. Eli shifted uneasy. "Didn't mean disrespect, sir. Just stories travel fast in a small town." "They do," Henry said. "Faster than truth, usually." He nodded toward the mailbox. "Appreciate the help." Eli hesitated. "Mind if I stop by again? We're testing the new engine route past here." Henry looked at him for a long moment, measuring something invisible. Then he nodded. "Coffee's at 6. Bring your own stories." Eli grinned, half relieved. "Yes, sir." As the young man walked away, the late light caught the coin's edge still peeking from Henry's pocket. For an instant, Eli saw his own reflection bent in the metal, uncertain small half of a question he couldn't name. He paused on the sidewalk, watching the old man settle back into the porch shadow. The flag stirred once like breath returning. Still, he wondered if what he'd heard was wrong, or if legends simply aged quieter than truth. The town hall still smelled of polish and paper, a mix of rules and worry. Folding chairs lined the floor beneath a banner that read, "Ashfield Homeowners Association Quarterly Meeting." Henry Doyle sat in the second row, hat on his knee, the notice from his gate folded like a ticket that refused to tear. At the front, 3 board members shuffled papers. The chairwoman, crisp in pastel blue, cleared her throat. "Mr. Doyle," she began, regarding the flag display at your residence. "The committee reviewed your case, Massam." Henry rose halfway, steadying himself on the chair. "Ma'am, the flag's been there for years. Same size, same hill." "Yes," she said, glancing at her notes. "But new ordinances require approval for fixtures exceeding 6 feet in height." A few heads turned. Some nodded. Others just waited for the part where the fine came. From the back, a voice spoke up, firm, older, a touch of choir warmth. "Martha Calhoun, record me present." The gray-haired woman walked to the microphone like she'd been leading hymns all her life. "Some folks measure pride wrong," she said. "They see a flag and think it's clutter. I see a man who kept it flying when the rest of us were still learning what that meant." A murmur rolled through the room. One man whispered, "It's not about patriotism, it's compliance." Martha faced him. "Compliance without respect is just noise." Eli stood near the side wall helmet under his arm. He hadn't planned to speak. He'd only come to see how it ended. From his pocket, something metal slipped and clinked against the floor. The sound drew eyes, a brief silver note in a wooden room. Henry looked back. Their gazes met. Eli bent, picked up the brass coin, turning it once before handing it back. "Dropped this, sir. Seems it finds its own stage," Henry said quietly, pocketing it again. The chairwoman sighed. "The board's decision stands. A fine of $75 payable within 30 days. No one applauded. The hum of the ceiling fans filled the silence. Outside, through the tall windows, the church choir practiced for Sunday. Their voices slipped between the shutters, a slow hymn about mercy and home. Henry gathered his hat. Martha touched his arm. "You could appeal, you know." He smiled faintly, and missed the chance to keep the peace. "You don't owe peace to folks who can't see it," she said. He tipped his hat. "You'd make a good sergeant." Then thunder rolled across the hill, low and long, the kind that promises rain before anyone's ready. A few drops tapped the windows. Henry turned toward the door. "Looks like I'm dismissed," he said, and stepped out into the coming storm. The hall lights flickered once. The hymn carried on. Eli watched through the open door as Henry's figure crossed the square, hat tilted against the drizzle. The flag on his porch, visible even from here, still upright, still defiant against the gray. The storm arrived just after dusk, dragging the horizon shut. Wind pressed against the windows of Henry Doyle's small house on Ashfield Hill, rattling the frames like an impatient visitor. The flag outside whipped in the dark, its rope slapping metal against metal, a heartbeat with no rhythm left. Inside, Henry sat at the table, the unpaid notice folded neatly beside his coffee. The house creaked, as if remembering younger bones. He could have stayed put, let the storm do what rules had already started, but the thought of the pole snapping felt like betrayal. He rose slowly, reaching for his jacket. The brass coin slipped from the pocket, spinning once on the floor, before coming to rest under the chair. He stooped to pick it up. Lightning flashed through the window, and with it came memory. He was 23 again, inside a helicopter that smelled of oil and fear. A patch of red light painted the cabin. Across from him sat Walker, the kid who'd carried the radio and too much hope. Walker grinned, tapped the new insignia on Henry's sleeve. "We'll bring it home," he'd said. Then the flash was gone. The room returned quiet except for the rain. Henry closed his hand around the coin. "You kept your word," he whispered, "so will I." He stepped onto the porch. The rain was hard and cold, stinging through his shirt. The flag had tangled halfway down the pole, its edge caught tight. Each gust bent the aluminum like it wanted surrender. Henry gripped the line. His hands shook, not from fear, but from effort. The wind shoved him sideways. Water blurred the world into silver streaks. Still, he leaned in. The old training, the rhythm of tasks done right, took over. One knot, one breath, one lift. He lifted the flag like memory itself. Lightning carved a white river across the clouds. For a second, everything held still, the man, the pole, the storm itself, locked in a frame of discipline. Then came a voice behind him. Mr. Doyle. Eli was running up the drive jacket over his head boots, splashing through the puddles. "Let me help." Henry didn't turn. "Grab the base. Keep it straight." Together they fought the wind until the line cleared. The flag rose again, snapping wide and alive. The sound was fierce, clean. When they finally steadied the pole, Henry exhaled. The storm still raged, but something inside the noise had softened. Across the street, a few neighbors stood under umbrellas drawn out by lightning more than courage. No one spoke. They simply watched the weight of their earlier judgment pressing back on them. He was slammed by the silence of the crowd that watched a pressure heavier than any storm. Henry nodded toward Eli. "Hold it there, son." Eli's voice trembled. "Yes, sir." For a moment, the two stood together, one steadying the pole, one steadying the past, until the rope sang tight and the flag found its rhythm again. The rain began to thin. Thunder rolled off into distance. Henry pressed the coin into Eli's palm. "Keep it safe till morning." Eli started to protest. Henry only said, "Every flag needs someone younger to hold the line." A final flash lit their faces bright as revelation. Then came darkness again, quiet, alive, forgiven. By sunrise, the storm had gone, leaving the hill rinsed clean, and the air new. The flag still stood, edges torn, but proud, throwing its shadow over the porch rail like a kept promise. At the diner downtown, the windows fogged from early coffee and rain-damp coats. The smell of pumpkin pie and bacon filled the narrow room. Henry sat at his usual stool. His jacket was draped over the back. The brass coin lay on the counter beside his cup. Maria the waitress topped off his mug. "Heard you were out there in that mess last night." Wasn't much, Henry said. "Just weather." From the booth behind him came a low voice. "Weather doesn't salute you, old man." Eli turned from the far end of the counter. "That's enough, Rick." The man looked up, recognized Eli's station patch, and sank back into his pie. Henry smiled. "Let him talk. He's got to use his voice before it forgets him." The bell over the door jingled. Mayor Porter stepped in, hat in hand, followed by the HOA chairwoman. Conversation dimmed like someone had turned down the radio. "Mr. Doyle," the mayor said. "May I sit?" Henry gestured to the empty stool. "If you don't mind coffee, that's seen better mornings." The mayor settled, cleared his throat. "About that citation, we reviewed the footage. Half the town saw what you did out there. Council voted to rescind the fine. Consider it wiped." Henry nodded once. "Appreciate that." The chairwoman looked down. "I'm sorry, Mr. Doyle. I didn't understand." "Most don't," he said gently. "Takes a little rain to hear things right." Eli slid a plate toward him, pumpkin pie still warm. "On the house, sir." Henry raised a brow. "Thought you only fought fires." "Sometimes we fix what the wind breaks." Laughter, soft relieved, moved through the diner. Someone switched the radio from news to a gospel station. The singer's voice filled the air, worn and kind. Sometimes quiet wins louder than anger ever could. No one knew who said it first, Henry or Eli, but the phrase hung there true enough to stay. Henry reached into his pocket, drew out the brass coin, and set it beside his check. "For the refill," he said. Maria frowned. "That's not money, hon." He smiled. "It pays in remembering." She understood anyway. As he stood to leave, the morning light cut through the blinds, and the shadow of the flag moved slow across the counter, across the coin, across every face turned toward it. No one spoke. The gospel singer held the last note long enough for silence to answer. Outside, the flag caught a new breeze and lifted. The town that once fined him watched through glass and saw itself reflected in that motion, ordinary people trying in their small ways to stand for something steady. Eli stepped beside him on the sidewalk. "You coming to the game this weekend?" "Maybe," Henry said. "Depends if the sky behaves." They both laughed, quiet and easy, like two friends sharing coffee with the weather. The hill waited above them, sunlight climbing its slope. Henry touched the brim of his hat, a gesture half salute, half thanks, and walked toward home. Sunday morning opened with a soft blue light. The storm was a story now told in puddles in clean air, in the way the town breathed easier. Up on Ashfield Hill, the flag-weighted edges mended colors bright again under the early sun. Henry Doyle sat on the porch with a mug of coffee steaming between his hands. The radio hummed an old gospel tune from the window, something about grace finding ordinary men. Eli's truck eased to a stop by the gate tires crunching gravel. "Morning, Sir Eli," said, stepping out in his dress uniform. "Big day. Mayor's got half the town coming up the hill." Henry smiled. "Then we'd better get the coffee right." They carried 2 thermoses and the folded flag up the short slope together. The air smelled of wet pine and sunlight on new paint. A small crowd gathered near the pole, neighbors, choir members, kids in Sunday clothes. Martha Calhoun stood beside the mayor hymn book in hand. When the time came, the mayor spoke simply. "We honor the service we once overlooked, and the man who reminded us that respect isn't paperwork." He nodded to Henry. "Would you do the honors?" Henry unfolded the flag with slow, practiced hands. The fabric whispered against his palms, each crease remembering something he didn't have to say. Eli held the base steady the same way he had during the storm. As the cloth rose catching the dawn light, Henry's voice carried clear and low. From Ashfield Hill, the flag rose steady in the dawn. The words settled over the crowd like sunlight, quiet and sure. Martha began a hymn. Others joined softly. For a moment, the town sounded whole. When the last note faded, Henry reached into his pocket and drew out the small brass coin. "You kept this safe," he said to Eli. "Now it's yours." Eli hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Henry said. "Every hill needs someone young enough to climb it twice." Eli closed his hand around the coin. "What if I forget what it stands for?" Henry smiled. "Then hold it tighter until you remember." They stood together while the flag lifted in the morning breeze. The coffee steamed beside them. The radio's tune drifted faintly through the open windows below. The silent beat hung between them, warm, steady enough. Down the hill, children chased each other through puddles. Martha wiped her eyes. The mayor tipped his hat. Even the wind seemed to slow content to carry the story forward. Henry looked over the town, then at Eli. "You'll take care of it when I'm not around." Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. Promise." Henry gave a small, satisfied sigh. "That's all any of us can do." He turned once more toward the flag, its shadow stretching long and patient across the grass. "The quietest thanks are the ones that last." The words were barely more than breath, but they felt larger than sound, like a note held past its echo. If this story moved, you share it forward. The hill was quiet that morning, the flag lifting slow against a pale sky, and Henry's empty porch smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Still, the brass plaque by the pole caught sunlight, in honor of Henry Doyle, who kept the flag upright when the wind forgot how, and every Sunday the choir's hymn drifted up from town like a promise kept. Then inside the diner, Eli Turner left a single brass coin beside 2 refilled cups, the steam curling toward the window where the flag's shadow moved like breath. Quietly, people began leaving their own tokens, buttons, patches, folded notes, proof that gratitude doesn't need volume to last. From Ashfield Hill, the flag rose steady in the dawn, and the town understood at last that the smallest acts of steadiness can outshout any storm. The quietest thanks are the ones that last. If this story moved you, share it forward.